Okay, so here we have War Girls by Jessie Pope. So straight away, when we're talking about this poem, we should be able to remember that context that we've got. So we should be looking for positive imagery and, of course, that pro-war stance that we know from her in our previous lessons. So, as we start reading, I'll just look at the title as well. And we should be able to notice that obviously, yes, there's that theme of war straight away, but also the use of girls is quite an interesting one when you consider the serious nature of the poem. So again, we should be looking at that and thinking, well, if there's girls being used instead of women, then the likelihood of that is that she probably is going to be continuing on the same theme that we've seen before and should be able to link to things like who's for the game. Now, as we read through it, we should be looking for themes, and of course, that theme of women or the girls being strong, being masculine, being like those men, and also being very able at those jobs, is evident all the way through the poem. If we look at structure, we should see that every first four lines, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and in that second stanza here, 1, 2, 3, 4, looks a little bit like a list of those jobs that those women are indeed doing around the country. So we've got things like the train, people working in the lifts, people working in the milk. So basically in all of them, everyday jobs at that kind of time in the country's history, and of course those jobs that would have been done by men. Now the next 5 lines in both of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and again in here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, in both stanzas, seems to be utilised really to be showing how good these women are at the jobs that they've taken over. And then again, unfortunately, the final line that's been repeated in both of them seems to be a bit of a caveat, almost like a limitation to how good they are, almost in a bit of a nod to them. So yes, we've got these men leaving, so it's this idea that actually, don't worry men, these girls are a strong, sensible fit, show the grit, tackle jobs, they're going to be fantastic with it. Don't worry, they're going to be able to keep up their end of the bargain. Don't worry, they're not actually as feminine as you think they are. They can actually do stuff. They're not going to be this traditional feminine stereotype, but they are going to be able to do their jobs. But then it kind of seems to be a bit of a, yes, go on girls, like you can be fantastic, but, oh, don't worry, guys, like, you will come back. Now, this could probably be easily understood by this idea that if you want your soldiers to actually to go and fight and to be happy fighting, the idea of them coming home to their jobs being taken probably isn't a very pleasant idea. It's probably not going to be convincing people to actually go to war. So there's probably this caveat, this limitation at the end of each one. Yes, girls, you're fantastic, but don't worry, boys, you can go and fight in good spirits knowing that we're looking after everything for you, don't worry. That's probably, for me anyway, I would say that's the most obvious representation or use of that line that she's doing. So if we go through and we look for some techniques, we've got a lot of positive representation here from things like this triplet on the first line, the 3 adjectives, strong, sensible, fit, show their grit. If we look at the verb use, tackle, okay, it's very forceful, it's very positive. Again here, when we talk about them, yes, they're kind of not lacking in the positive representation of women. So yes, they're saying it's soft and warm, but she's trying to avoid those stereotypical weak associations with women. She's taking the positive stereotypes and then she's adding to that, actually, we're not being quite frivolous. We can be solemn, okay? We can be serious. We're also not just going to be running off. We are going to be doing a good job of this until you come back. Now, really, really interesting here is that, yes, we have all this positive imagery, and she's kind of very similar to in Who's for the Game. She's kind of almost making a game of it, a challenge of it. Go on, boys. Go on, khaki soldier boys, off you go. You are going to come back. There's this positive idea about the war. Boys, you're going to go off, you'll fight. It's almost like a game. It's that sporting idea ideology again. But then she's put this metaphor in here of no longer caged and penned up. And for me, again, I think this metaphor is really interesting because it does show perhaps an underlying tension there in those kind of stereotypes, and not just the stereotypes really, but the culture and society at the time, and that actually there is a bit of an underlying kind of tension between men and women. This final line perhaps explains why she doesn't go in too much into it, because potentially you don't want to be undermining the kind of the positive energy of the men who are going to sign up and go and fight for the country. But it does, this metaphor of them being like animals shows that kind of hierarchy there in a negative way. The connotations of caged and penned are obviously very negative. It's like they're being forced to not really be able to do much. It's like they are being treated as lower down in the kind of hierarchical nature of society. And whenever obviously now we think of being caged, and then as well I suppose there is this idea that their potential is being wasted. If they're being caged, they're not really being set free to go and fulfill their true kind of what they are able to do, their true potential, and things like that. So let's have a quick look at a model answer now, because I do think that overall theme is positive. There's a lot of stuff going on there. So I've just gone through, and you will have one of these printed out for you if you wrote on this poem that you can go through as well. But I'll just read it through, and I'll pick out some aspects of it. So how are feelings about war presented in War Girls? So Jessie Pope shows in her poem War Girls that she feels the war is an opportunity for women to stand up and show their worth. We can see this throughout the poem as a whole through the use of positive verbs and adjectives associated with the women at work. Pope starts this with the triplet of adjectives in strong, sensible and fit, which highlights three characteristics that were stereotypically associated with men. Pope ensures here that her reader immediately understands that women are not to be discounted, as they possess exactly the same characteristics as their male counterparts. Pope further conveys this through the use of the verb tackle, when she describes how the jobs will be carried out. The reader is slowly being convinced that these war girls are up to the job at hand, as they are repeatedly described with masculine characteristics. Furthermore, as we continue into the poem's second stanza, Pope uses a simile like a man. Pope is determined to convince the reader that the women are able to do the jobs vacated by the men, and to feel confident in their ability, as she does. Perhaps the use of the third person is meant to make the point of view seem more convincing and authoritative, to lend weight to this viewpoint. Pope was known for having a pro-war stance and for making war seem like a game, so one cannot help but to question whether Pope's motives were to convince the men that they could leave the country to fight, and that the women should work to help out too. Therefore, Pope's feelings about the war being a good opportunity for women to stand up and show their worth is conveyed through the use of adjectives, verbs and a simile throughout the poem. So if we're thinking about this, the structure of this as a paragraph, and also linking it to the mark scheme, we've got at the beginning that point that she feels that the war is an opportunity for women, and then I'm just trying to link to show that it's an overall theme throughout the whole poem, it's not just the one-off, and I'm being as specific as I can. I'm labelling those techniques. So I'm saying about the verbs and about the adjectives. So I'm using more technical language here, not just the words or the quote. And then I start my explanation. So how I put in my evidence, sorry. So Pope starts us with the triplet. Again, I'm being as technical as possible. Triplet and adjectives. And I'm giving that quote. And again, I don't just put the quote on its own, I'm embedding it into a paragraph, into a sentence in the paragraph. Embedding, obviously, so it's in the middle. It's not just tacked on at the end or put in at the beginning. Now again, I'm trying not to use words like show, so you'll see in here that I will try and avoid show where possible. Okay, sometimes it is the perfect one to use, but there are plenty of other words that we can use instead of show. So again, as I go through, I analyse this, I link it to the question the whole way through, and then because I've done one quote here, I'm carrying on. So I use verb again, but I'm adding to that. I'm trying to add layers. So I'm now going on to another quote that backs it up. I'm showing that this is a theme that goes all the way through the poem. And again, I'm using words like convey, okay, and ensures rather than showing. As we carry on, again, I'm trying to talk about the reader now. So what is that effect on the reader? So what's the author doing? What is going on with the reader? And then the readers are being convinced about something, and I'm explaining exactly what is going on with the reader. Now, to show that that is going on throughout the whole poem, again, I'm bringing in yet another quote. I'm being technical with simile. Okay, again, I could easily, if I wanted to improve this, I could change the word uses to something a little bit better. But as we keep going on, I've said determined, she's convincing, and I'm linking everything to the reader. So what is the author doing? Okay, why are they doing it? Who are they doing it to, and what's going on with that? So again, I'm adding a bit more layers to it at the end here. So if your target is more of an 8 or a 9, this is the kind of level that I would like you to think at. So is there something a bit more abstract? So when talking about the poem, I didn't talk about whether it was in first or third person, but I am now. I'm looking at how actually that third person can often make things seem a bit more formal, a bit more authoritative. It's not just Pope's kind of idea here. It's not in first person, this is third person, so it's either something that's now commonly held, or it's something that's not just her views, it's that of other people. Now, I've realised in here that I'm not linking it through to context. So if we look at that point 5 on your mark scheme, I've not been looking at context, so I want to add some in. So again, I'm going linking about the pro-war, how it all links in, and then I'm trying to link it again to maybe that point 4 of what is the author's viewpoint, like why are they doing what they're doing. So what is their, do I have that, if I look at it for excellence, I have an original, evaluative and complex understanding of writers' ideas and themes, and so here I'm looking at that overall, actually as a whole, why might they be doing this? Well, it could be to convince them, and I've linked it all together. And when I've done that, I've gone right back to the start again. I've made that link back to the question, and with that link, I'm using exactly the same language and the same words as I have in the introduction in that point at the beginning of the paragraph. So again, I've basically just put exactly the same words of what those feelings are, and again, a summary, a link of all those techniques, just to remind myself, and of course, the person reading, that I am being technical, I do understand what's going on, and again, using the same language just basically reminds me that you have done exactly what you said this paragraph was going to do. So if you now use your printed version of this, I'd like you to go through. You can label different sections if that helps you, but I'd like you to use this now to help as an example to go through and improve your own work. And of course, if you do have those task targets or those dirt tasks that are linked to any different sections of this paragraph writing, then you can take these sections out and use it to help reword your own and to improve it.